Jai Bhagwan, Woman Warriors, and welcome to day 78, as well as today's empowerment talk. So, I've been really thinking a lot about this whole concept of resiliency. And I wanted to share with you the definition of resiliency. And there's a couple of pieces that stand out from the Oxford Dictionary that I found really cool. The first is resiliency is a noun. But it is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties. Toughness. On the psychological side, it said that psychological resilience is the ability to cope mentally and emotionally with a crisis or to return to pre-crisis status quickly. And I thought those two were super relevant because of what's going on in our world right now. And I wanted to talk about resiliency from an Ayurvedic perspective. So if we are looking at the ability to withstand or recover from difficulties, what do you think are the important factors of that as it relates to our physical health? Excuse me. And when we look at that, let's look at this from a doshic perspective. Okay, so if we need to bounce back or recover physically, we are looking at really ensuring that we are fortified in our Kapha dosha. So remember, all of the doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, exist inside of us. And just as a review, Vata is responsible for everything that moves, is transported, and communicates inside of our bodies. And Vata's domain is really about the mind and the spinal cord, as well as, believe it or not, the colon, and that's something for later. Pitta is responsible for our ability to digest, to metabolize, and to transform things. So it's very teed up with the digestive system, specifically the eyes, believe it or not, because the eyes digest what it is that we see, as well as the small intestines. And then we have Kapha, which is responsible for the structure, strength, immunity, and lubrication of our bodies. So it's all the hard stuff. It is the bones, our muscles, joints, ligaments, and as well as synovial fluid and all of the lubrication that exists inside of our body. So when we look at resilience, let's look at it from a physical standpoint first, that first layer of the body. We want to fortify our structure, strength, immunity, and lubrication in our body. And so this is why these 108 practices every single day are super important in doing that. And specifically, the ones that I will highlight are exercise, the hydration, or the gallon of water a day. And I wonder how some of you are doing with that, as well as our diet, so that 50% of all of your meals are plant-based is really important. And that, what that does is that fortifies our bodies. The food piece of it also helps with the Pitta side of it, as well as our hydration. So Kapha and Pitta in resiliency have a relationship because the structure of our body gets fortified and is able to establish reserves of energy in the body through our physical exercise, through our proper diet and our hydration. And then Pitta takes over with metabolizing and digesting that to ensure that it gets to the muscles to fortify it, to the cells, to the joints, to lubricate the body, etc. So those two work in tandem together. So it is important that we get our daily exercise. And one of the things that I'm being reinforced with, which is wonderful, is I'm currently studying for my recertification for personal training, and we're going over the idea of the bones and the need for us to have that in order for us to stimulate bone growth or bone density after we get out of those initial stages of adolescence, is that we do need to load the bones, and loading the bones with things like weight training, as well as proper alignment in things like yoga, yoga asana specifically, or mobility training is super important because it strengthens the bones and also gives us that ability to fortify the body and strengthen it from that physical structure standpoint. When we look at Pitta, Pitta, as I mentioned, also does the tandem job with being able to manifest that proper digestion, metabolism, etc. So everything gets to where it needs to, so that we have proper energy throughout the day, and that all of the tissues, muscles, joints, and bones get what it is that they need. Then we're looking at psychological resilience. So let me repeat that definition again. Psychological resistance is the ability to cope mentally and emotionally with a crisis or to return to pre-crisis status quickly. And right now there is, I would venture to say, a lot of crises that are happening in the world. And these are things that might be happening with you personally, might be the loss of a job or a relationship or a death in the family. It might be financial crisis. It might be just overall general stress that's happening, having to do too much in too short a period of time, as well as feeling like we have to do all of these things, so we add stress to our lives. But resiliency from a mental standpoint needs the support and the reserves of the relationship between Kapha and Pitta. But it also really wholly relies on our practices as it relates to managing and maintaining Vata dosha. So Vata dosha, as I said, is responsible for everything that communicates and is transported and moves throughout our body. So yes, it does have that relationship with Kapha and Pitta in the systems of the body as it relates to circulation, as it relates to the respiratory system and things like that. But when we look at it from a psychological standpoint, which is really like Vata's domain, we can see that we can become imbalanced with our thoughts, and that is where Vata kind of dwells. So the practices in the 108 are reinforcing our mental resilience through our meditation and our pranayama practices. Exercise as well, because when we do exercise, and really, to be honest with you, exercise and proper diet and proper sleep are the three cures for a lot of states of disease. So that's why we just constantly encourage, like, make sure that you are doing your practices every single day. With the meditation and pranayama, that allows us to begin to manage and maintain our mental emotional states so that we don't get triggered as quickly, that we can breathe through situations, and that we also can use those techniques when we feel a heightened state of fight or flight. When cortisol levels rise, we can go back to these practices. And the reason why we do them every single day is so that we create memory, that we create, quote, muscle memory, as well as just mental emotional memory. It's, if we stop practicing something, it's very easy to forget. And so a lot of times it's like, oh, yeah, meditation and pranayama, like that's not something I really need to practice. I know how to breathe. And if I needed to sit still, I could. Actually, you don't. And I've learned that the hard way myself, that if this isn't something that we do on a daily basis, that we don't practice this, then when we need it in a state of heightened crisis or heightened awareness, where something is stimulating our sympathetic nervous system, we have it there to go to. I put it akin to back in the day when Michael and I would train yoga teachers for asana practices. And when we were running regular yoga teacher trainings at the 200-hour level, we had a, quote, set sequence that we would teach the teachers on a very foundational level, so that they not only did they have something to teach, but they had a routine that was something that they could go to. And usually towards the end of a yoga teacher training, then students are like, well, what about this posture? What about this posture? Can I learn how to teach this? What are the cues for that, etc.? And we would constantly reinforce going back to the foundational practice, not to be boring, not to just keep people in a box, but rather have that foundational routine that they knew inside and out, so that if anything went wrong in a yoga studio, in a yoga class, whether it was the music didn't work or the power went out or something, or in a hot yoga studio the heat didn't work, etc., they had something that they had in their toolbox that was easy to grab because they had practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And it's the same thing with meditation and pranayama. These are things that we have to practice and practice and practice. And actually, all of the practices that we have in the 108 are things that we have to do every single day, every single day, every single day, so that we have them in our toolkit. When we have those tools that have been practiced that become go-tos, then we can easily manage our resilience. We can see how much quicker we can bounce back, whether it is through a short-term crisis or something that is longer term. When we look at stress across the board, especially in the United States, we have short bursts of stress, but one of the things that exists across the country is that about 73% of people are dealing with long-term ongoing chronic stress. And their resiliency isn't there because it keeps tearing away at them. And as a result, the mental emotional state begins to decay. And what happens is we get brain fog, we have memory lapses, we can start to develop addictions or tics because we don't know how to be in a sattvic state, in a state of calm. Our digestion begins to get very messy, and the temperature regulation in our bodies, which is a job of Pitta as well, is something that starts to go awry, that we start to derail off of that. So we can experience things like gas or bloating or acid reflux, etc. So a lot of folks, are like, well, I've never had this before. Well, if you're dealing with either short-term stress or chronic stress, that's something that is going to happen. So your resiliency in that Vata and that Pitta section of life begins to deteriorate. And then what also happens when we deteriorate and we lose our resiliency as it relates to stressful things in our lives, then the physical body starts to feel it. And then we can actually start to lose bone density. We can start to gain weight. We can start to increase the inflammation in our bodies. We can experience physical pain. And then sometimes our mental emotional states will then follow, where it's like, fuck it, why do I even bother? Why do I bother to exercise? Why do I do this? And then we can start to become sluggish and start falling into these patterns of behavior. So the point with today's resiliency empowerment talk is we want to continue to do these practices so that we can fortify our bodies on the physical level with Kapha, on the digestive level with Pitta, and the mental emotional level with Vata, so that they are go-to things that when things get difficult in our lives, because they always do, we have personal things that are going on, we have global things that are going on in the world, that we can manage it much better. So become resilient. Become that person that has those practices that are go-tos, and that you can lead by example with your family, with your friends, with your community. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everybody. Jai Bhagwan.